So welcome to our monthly podcast from WithSecure. We're calling it Cyber Threat Exposed. And we're dissecting the research that our threat intelligence team has undertaken and reported on over the past month and discuss what it means for the cybersecurity industry, particularly the mid-market, because we appreciate they don't necessarily have a threat intelligence team in-house to do this for them.
This podcast is brought to you in association with AIO, a proud WithSecure partner. AIO provides cybersecurity managed services, enabling customers to fearlessly expand their use of IT. Based in Leeds, UK, they work with clients in public and private sectors to design, develop, and implement a variety of solutions to meet the ever-changing IT landscape.
My name is Tim West. I work in the threat intelligence team at WithSecure. I'm joined by Steve.
I'm Stephen Robinson, and I also work in our threat intelligence team.
So it's the first time doing this. We're going to be pretty rusty, but let's jump in. What are the top stories from last month, please, Steve?
Yeah. So kind of the top stories have been disagreements. So we've had JetBrains and Rapid 7 disagreeing about disclosure. There was a Team City vulnerability that Rapid 7 discovered. They wanted to put it straight out there. JetBrains, they wanted to quietly patch it, tell some people, wait for it to be patched, and then tell everybody, which didn't happen. Lots of finger pointing. And in the end, there were 2 days after the patch was released, there were 1,400 compromised Team City servers on the internet. It looked really bad for both of them. Should Team City have worked more with Rapid 7? Would that have been better? Should Rapid 7 not have put out the proof of concept? Would that have been better? It's really hard to say, if you're not involved, if you're not kind of tied into that. But there was a real disagreement. And when we're relying on these people to tell us what to do, that's a problem. Similarly, we had CISA and Ivanti disagreeing about the ICS, the Ivanti Connect Secure, where CISA said, the tools that Ivanti have put out won't necessarily detect compromises. And then Ivanti went, actually, they will, particularly now we've just adjusted them based on what CISA said. But this is a 4-month-old rolling incident of Ivanti. I think anyone who's looked at cybersecurity in the last quarter will be aware of this. And here we are still with disagreements on what the best thing to do is, and also what the correct remediation steps are. At this point, someone could have followed the exact instructions that they were given, and they could still have been done over through no fault of their own. And in fact, CISA, big US cybersecurity agency, they had a ICS-led compromise. So it's a hard one.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of fair to say that the people at JetBrains and Rapid 7 who are disagreeing and CISA and Ivanti are all on the same side and want the same thing.
Yeah, they've all got the best intentions and they all think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, but it's just a different approach, and people have got different thoughts and styles on that. And what does that really mean for the end user, somebody who has got hundreds of vulnerabilities on their estate, a lot of technical debt, have to triage constantly and patch constantly?
I think triage is the key thing, isn't it? You've got to make a decision with the information that you've got, and you've got to try and get good information. And that is what these various organizations are trying to do. Rapid 7's stance is that the defenders need to get the information as quickly as they can because the attackers are going to be heavily motivated as well. Whereas JetBrains, they want to ensure only the defenders get it, which might not be realistic. So I think you've just got to do the best that you can. You've got to prioritize the information you've got. And if the information turns out to be wrong, you can't kick yourself for it.
Yeah. I think it highlights as well that patch management isn't the discipline that exists between patch release and patch application. There was a lot of work that goes into security patching and updating software to close security holes. It's really difficult, really complex. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of challenge.
Yeah, it's that whole exposure management thing, really, isn't it?
yeah. Which is a concept more than it is a process in isolation, I guess.
Cool. All right. What else are we talking about?
Well, what have the Chinese and Russians been up to?
Not much. It's a bit boring.
Okay.
They hacked lots of people, lots of governments. Everyone was very upset.
I've heard that about them.
Yeah, exactly. I think the main thing to note on this one is that there's been a lot of hacking of parliaments around the world. doesn't directly impact people. But we have had in the UK, the Electoral Commission got hacked back in 2021. And the big hit there is not necessarily that they're going to be, puppeting UK democracy like a puppet, but instead the fact that they could have stolen the entire Electoral Commission database of very high quality, personally identifiable information on UK voters. And that in our current, data-driven, data science-led world is probably pretty valuable.
So we're not going to see an awful lot of... There's not going to be an immediate feedback loop on the implications of this compromise. It's going to be a slow burn.
Yeah, and this was 3 years ago as well. So who knows what the impact has been there. But.
Some news in brief, Steve, and this has to be brief. I don't have any control over
super brief
post-production, but I would quite like our editors to put in some kind of countdown theme to make sure you stick to. Okay. Strict 2 minutes. Go.
All right. IoT has turned out to be exactly as secure as you think it would be. SAFLOC RFID key cards, i.e. the things you use in hotels, turn out there's 3 million doors in 131 countries that can be easily opened by attackers, and patching them is probably going to take years, so that's not good. Then we have heavy goods vehicles in the US have to have special logging devices built in. It turns out that they have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and thus you can drive alongside these vehicles, send them some malware, and control their speed, which to me sounds bad.
Bad, yeah.
And we know that happened because the researchers actually did it. We have Fortinet EMS, Enterprise Management Server, is under attack. It's under attack, and it has a new vulnerability, which is a SQL injection, because, as I say every time, apparently it's still 2002, people. The issue with this is that an enterprise management server manages your enterprise, and if it is controlled by somebody else, then somebody else is managing your enterprise.
Why is that? Why have you put that in the highlights and brief section then, Steve? Just quickly, if that sounds pretty severe.
I've put it in the highlights and brief because it's brief.
Okay.
It's very severe, but that's kind of all there is to say, is that it's bad and you need to patch it. There's not much more beyond that.
Are we becoming desensitized to these kind of...
Yes.
Right.
I'm definitely becoming desensitized. I realised the other day I'd gone, it's only an 8.6.
Wow.
Because we'd have so many 9s and 10s. You're interrupting me. You're trying to get me off my stride.
You're going to miss the time now.
Exactly. Google Firebase apparently is a very easily misconfigured back-end database, and 125 million user records were left publicly accessible from 900 websites that used it. So that's a lot of user records exposed. One misconfiguration is probably the user. 900 misconfigurations, I'm going to say, is probably something about the back-end. So we'll leave it at that. The EU has passed an AI Act to regulate AI and LLMs. This, I think, is a good thing. It's trying to protect, people's rights, democracy, stuff like that. People who are critics of the act have said they're worried that it won't allow the EU to compete so well with China and the US in the areas of predictive policing, social scoring, and biometric categorization systems based on sensitive characteristics. I'd just like to say that if the EU is not as good at that as China and the US, that's probably a good thing and not a bad thing. And we also have that a database of two-factor authentication codes sent over SMS was left exposed on the internet. We're talking millions, if not tens of millions of those text messages you get when you try and log into somewhere were just left open on the internet for stuff like Google, TikTok, Facebook, WhatsApp, all of this, which is terrible. It has been patched, but it turns out that the owners of the database keep no logs as to who accessed it. So there is no way to tell how much that was dug into before it was patched. And that's my brief.
Okay, I think you're just about at time as well. So good job there.
Nice.
I think the AI story is pretty positive, but
it's nice to have a positive one about AI, isn't it?
We haven't had an awful lot of AI stories in for Marches, so I don't think we necessarily need to unpack that a bit more, but maybe next month it's going to come, isn't it?
There's been a lot of movement, but it's generally the same story again and again, which is like, oh no, we found something terrible, but we've patched it. And I think it's just not fundamental enough really to make it.
Ransomware this month, then. It's been quite an interesting month, right?
Yeah. We've had the whole Alfie exit scam, which has been wonderful to observe from a distance.
Yeah.
Not much happening on the numbers, to be honest. So Lockbit, fudged their numbers heavily, trying to make themselves look like some sort of uber group when actually they're about the same. I mean, they are the leaders of the pack, but they're right in there with them.
Just some numbers on that. I think actually they profess to have breached about the same amount of victims in March that they did in February, at least hitting their breach site. But in reality, I think kind of more than half of those were reposts.
Yeah. So they had something like 107 they posted, but most of them are old. They just reposted them to make them look busy. I think, and hopefully we, well, I guess unless you've not been paying much attention to cyber news, that will be the reason behind that will be quite clear, right? So do you want to just kind of talk? Yeah. So since Lockbit had their takedown a little while ago by law enforcement, where suddenly their website vanished and was replaced by seized by a law enforcement post, and they apparently seized a bunch of data from Lockbit and screwed them over quite heavily in this.
That was actually quite amusing for us. Ransomware has kind of real world implications, and it affects people on a deeply personal level, and therefore it's great to see any kind of action that messes with them in any kind of way, shape, or form. Yeah. And I love the way that the NCA did their kind of takedown. They turned their page against them. It kind of showed they had a bit of a sense of humor as well. I thought,
it was deeply brilliant. Satisfying to watch.
Yeah, but on a serious note, I think it's done a lot of good. Like, protected a lot of victims, enabled them to recover from a Lockbit attack. It's undermined the kind of confidence, and it's had a psychological impact on the affiliate. So that's
and then you combine that with the Alfie kind of exit scam, and you've got a real impact. So the exit scam being in this case that an Alfie affiliate, so some hackers who work for them, hacked Change Healthcare in the US and basically had a huge impact on pharmacy issuing in the US, like national impact for weeks. And then it all started working again. And someone then posted on a e-crime forum saying that they'd been stiffed out of $22 million by the Alfie group, that they were the ones who'd hacked Change. They were meant to get their payment and they got nothing and just got banned. And then Alfie faked a law enforcement takedown of themselves and vanished. Apparently there's no honor among thieves when it comes to tens of millions of dollars of other people's money.
You're saying we can't trust these people?
I am definitely saying we cannot trust these people. I mean, Change paid them to delete data, but the affiliate went and pointed out that, the money went to Alfie. Alfie took the money, and the affiliate still has the data. And there's no way to guarantee that someone deletes data. If you're buying an encryptor, if you're paying a ransom to get a decryptor, you can at least decrypt your data and see it works. But if you're paying someone to delete data, there's no way they can prove it.
No, I think it's really important. I mean, with Secure, we've got a position on paying ransoms, and I don't want to go into it, but the key thing that we should kind of note is you can't trust these people.
Nope.
You need to have your eyes wide open to the risks associated with engaging and paying. And for some organizations, it's their only option, and a small chance of recovery is better than certain failure, I guess, in a business sense, not necessarily a cybersecurity sense. So just be aware and go into these negotiations and payments with pretty nefarious individuals with your eyes open as to the risks.
Yeah. But then, to go for a kind of a nice lighter point, really. Yeah, these two things, of course, such a crisis of confidence that there's a lot of new small ransomware groups springing up, trying to lure in affiliates with nice kind of generous terms of profit shares and things like this. So there's been a bit of a shake up there, and that's kind of nice to see, to be honest. Yeah,
so it's not really convinced any actors or many actors to leave the ransomware game, but it has undermined the brand of some of I think Lockbit and Alfie were probably the two most prolific ransomware actors. If you look at the data post on the leak sites, and obviously there's an inherent bias with that data. It's all attacker-led, for example, but it's a good indicator, the best indicator we've probably got as an industry as to how prolific these groups are. And the reason that these groups are so prolific is because they're so professional, and they've got the organization and the programs within themselves that make them run kind of almost almost like a legitimate business. So
yeah, so the more professional they can be, the more that they can get done, the more efficient they can be. So anything that stops criminals working together is good because it makes them less efficient.
Yep, and these splinter groups won't have the efficacy of Lockbit, which means that hopefully less victims, and that's really what we're all here for.
That's what we hope for. So another ransomware kind of piece of research has come out from Symantec. They've looked at 126 ransomware IR cases they were involved in, and in the last year, and they've said that the primary attack vector in the majority of cases was mass exploitation. So exploitation of internet-facing services. So that's a turnaround because before it was botnets, so things like Crackbot. Now, does that mean that there is more mass exploitation than there are botnet infections? No, because, in my view, there's still lots of phishing going on. There's still, all these attempts to deliver and drop malware and so on in that way. But this is cases where Symantec were called in. So basically, it evolved to the point that they needed incident response. And I would say that something leading towards that is the fact that if you compromise a server, particularly one of these edge servers, an attacker is then going to land on something that probably isn't monitored, that may be running with root, admin rights, whatever, and from there they can do a lot of damage. Whereas if they come in through a crackbot, botnet infection, anything like this, they're going to be on a user device, and then they've got to work their way from there to higher privilege across the network, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So I think it's just a better positioning for mass exploitation. I think they've worked that out as well.
It's quite efficient as well, isn't it?
Yes.
To the point where I think we've had ransomware actors not being able to cope with the efficiency of their campaigns and not really managing the data that well. Picture the scene, Steve. Last week I'm up a mountain, snowy mountain, sun's out. And I get back to the hotel and check my phone and see all this about the XZ backdoor. Now it's not something as such. I kind of smiled to myself in the knowledge that you were taking this on, and I went to the bar. So maybe you can talk us through the XZ backdoor that broke.
So essentially, wonderfully, there was a techie at Microsoft who was trying to iron out a tiny little issue that wasn't really affecting them or anyone else, but was just really annoying them. No one else would know, but they'd know. And digging away at this, they eventually found that someone had inserted a backdoor into XZ, which is a library or utility used on lots and lots of different operating systems and applications. And yeah, he inserted a backdoor into SSH on whatever system it was on. And they found this and were able to, raise the alarm and ensure that it wasn't pushed out any wider than it had been already. And there's been a lot of analysis of this. And it's one of those things where it's kind of a huge deal. It's really, it was a really carefully crafted long-term campaign by whoever was doing it. But it was stopped before it had that wide impact. And this is a huge indicator of software supply chain kind of risks, that basically someone was managing this open source piece of software, writing it, doing whatever else. And they basically got social engineered into letting somebody else make updates to it. And they started making malicious updates. And over years, they managed to get to this point. And that's kind of the issue with software supply chains, is that, you have to trust this software that you're using. But unless you take it apart line by line and with expertise examine it, you're not going to know if it is actually secure and safe. And in this case, if someone had looked at the source code, it would have looked okay, because they were making their changes within the CI/CD process. So as it was going from source code to package. So you would actually have had to take the final thing and pull it apart and see what it was doing. Or look into the actual steps of the CI/CD and see. And yeah, that's what happened. So it was a huge thing, really, with very little impact in a way. Amusingly, it made it into our threat data stats. It caused a decent enough spike in virus total to be in the kind of top 10 new vulnerabilities.
Presumably driven by everybody rushing to analyze.
Yeah. every Tom, Dick and Harry taking the Xed backdoor, Xed utility and dropping it into VirusTotal just to see.
Yeah.
So there's a little spike in there, which but just goes to show that those kind of public stats are totally tied to people submitting them. You know.
So on balance, is this a good news story then?
Yes, I think it's something that we know that people could try and do this sort of thing, and we hope that something like this, that someone just catching it might happen. It did involve luck, and obviously it does suggest the question of could this have happened elsewhere, without being detected?
Is this happening elsewhere?
Might be.
I feel like we're straying too far into into uncertainty and doubt. So
speculating.
Let's backpedal there.
We're fudding heavily.
Yeah. We don't want to do that.
No.
However, it is a good reminder of the kind of software bill of materials that isn't really collected, and there's open source elements in enterprise grade software.
Oh yeah, all over the place. There was something a while ago where Barracuda email gateways suddenly were found to have this huge vulnerability in them because they were using a Perl library, an open source Perl library for parsing Excel files. And so if you sent the right formatted Excel file to somebody who had a Barracuda gateway, you could own the gateway. And, you know, that sort of thing, just an open source library that people just use because it just works to do its thing. But whoever wrote it didn't have that in mind, or, did the best they could.
And well done for not mentioning Log4j, because it's an overused example.
Not mentioning it didn't happen, obviously.
Yeah.
So we also have a stat published by Google and Mandiant, Google-owned Mandiant. So I don't know why it's Google and Mandiant, but those guys looking at or stating there's been a 56% year-on-year increase in 0 days in 2023. So they went up to 97 this year, which is a lot. It hasn't just felt like there's been loads and loads of 0 days. There actually has been. Yeah,
it's nice when statistics do back up the anecdotal experience that you and I and our counterparts across the industry have felt. Mm-hmm. I would say, just for the avoidance of doubt, a 0 day is a vulnerability in a software package or service that hasn't been assigned a CVE and a patch hasn't been replaced. So usually a nefarious actor will discover this and exploit it before anybody's had a chance to update the software with the vulnerability to close that vulnerability.
Yeah, it's the whole how many days have you got between it being patched and it being exploited. 0 days. There are no days between those things happening because it was exploited before it was patched. And they've also come out saying that the number of enterprise software at 0 days went up 64%, so a bit more than the total average.
And this is a huge deal because there isn't really a protection against 0 days because by definition they're unknown. They're unknown unknowns.
Yeah. The issue with the 0 days, I think, as well, for just your average Joe, is that the only kind of defenses are full belt and braces, watchers watching the watchman kind of thing. And belts and braces together cost more money than just a belt. So most people are struggling to get the money for a single set of security systems, let alone doubling up.
Yeah. I think an analogy would be you can't prevent yourself from being shot, so you're putting all your eggs in the basket of the people in the hospital.
IT guys are a lot like plumbers. They often don't have belts and braces.
Okay.
Cheers, everyone.
I'm going to think about that for a while and understand what that means. But anyway, 0 days increasing is bad.
Bad. It's definitely bad.
Yeah. Great. So some key takeaways then. Let's go through these alternating. So the first is vulnerabilities, vulnerability management, patching. It's hard. It's really complicated. It's not just a case of downloading an update and double clicking it. It's tough.
Yes. The stories here we got where major industry players, actively and publicly disagreeing about the right way to do things. How are we going to do it? Number two, so security solutions can easily introduce their own vulnerabilities and risks. Multiple examples of that in some of the things covered in the report. Ideally, you put in a new security tool, you'd be more secure, not less.
Yeah. There's a lot that can be learned and achieved even post-compromise.
Yes. If anything, that's where you're going to learn the most. The British Library put out a report this month. Great example of this, really transparent. And it's a huge part of the job for our IR team to do that compromise analysis. And then the last one, I'll take this, is that a simple mistake can have a massive impact. Simple often means, fundamental, something which is of central and core importance. It doesn't have to be some complex, bizarre misconfiguration or alignment of the stars. Just getting a password wrong.
Yeah.
This podcast was brought to you in association with AIO. For more info on how to fearlessly expand your IT use, visit aio.tech.
How did you feel about that then, Steve?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I quite enjoy talking about this stuff. I'm that kind of sad geek.
Yeah, I thought you did quite well in reining some of your more outrageous opinions in.
I can just go. Do you remember that time I did that presentation that overran by an hour?
Yeah.
40-minute slot.
I do. Luckily, this isn't live, so we can edit this down.
We can edit. Yeah, we can just cut that out. It's fine. Okay. All that swearing you did in the middle. Whew.
Yeah, I actually think it's quite comical when you get just a random bleep over it's just doing. I've been swearing. Maybe I'll put some swears in the next months to keep our production team on their toes.
Or we could just get Craig to put beeps in over random words.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, that went well. We should do it again.
Okay.
Yeah.